Good morning to those on the West Coast, and good local time to wherever else you're joining us from. My name is Jesse McKee, and I'm the head of strategy at 221A. I lead the fellowships and digital strategy at the organization. Today, we're here to talk with Maksym Rokmaniko from the Center for Spatial Technologies about the past 2 years as a 221A fellow and to celebrate the launch of the Vancouver Housing Affordability Heat Map that was produced as a result of our shared research. I'd like to acknowledge with gratitude and respect that the city of Vancouver is built upon the unceded, unsurrendered, and traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples. The Squamish and Hunkaminam speaking peoples have stewarded these lands and waters since time immemorial. Maksym Rokmaniko is an architect, designer, and director of the Center for Spatial Technologies, which was founded in Kyiv, Ukraine. The CST focuses on architecture and research, hacking economic, technological, and political infrastructures to shape the future city. They are always more than 3D, and they are currently focused on the analysis of civilian damage caused by the Russian invasion of Ukraine. When we started working together, Maksym told me there's no one project or client of the Center for Spatial Technologies, so we'll get a glimpse of the breadth of their incredible work today. You can learn more about their current work focused on the analysis of war crimes and the damaged civilian infrastructure at the following links, which I will put in the chat for you to browse while we speak. I'd like to also acknowledge and deeply thank those who contributed to this project over the past 2 years, including Herman Mitish and Olesia Kovalenko at the Center for Spatial Technologies, as well as Charles Pan, who was a graduate student at the University of British Columbia's School of Community and Regional Planning, who joined the team for a year as a UBC Sustainability Scholar in 2021. As well, thank you to our funders who made this fellowship and project possible, the Canada Council for the Arts Digital Strategy Fund, as well as the Province of British Columbia's International Presence Program. The fellowship began with CST's DOMA project, which was looking for ways to design collective property systems that can alleviate the pressure of living in a contemporary city enmeshed in a cost of living crisis. Vancouver's at the spear's edge of such cities, since we have the comparable income of a city like Columbus, Ohio, but the property values of the San Francisco Bay Area. Needless to say to a Vancouverite, but the cost of access to property here has well overshot the affordability threshold for local incomes. Now, thanks to the CST and their work, we have a context-rich visual tool that can illustrate how the city's property values have re-territorialized this region since 2006, which is where we started with the data, as a predominantly unaffordable territory. The dashboard draws from several data sources, such as the City of Vancouver's tax assessments data, the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation's owner and rental data, as well as Statistics Canada and census data, and private market websites such as Willow and PadMapper. You can try the dashboard for yourself at doma.city/Vancouver. And I'll put that link in the chat for everyone as well. The project took nearly a 10-month pause this year, due firstly to my COVID infection and then a severe case of long COVID, which is still persisting, and then because of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. The CST team and their families have since relocated to other parts of Europe and have courageously continued their work, mostly focused on collecting, analyzing, and publishing context-rich studies around specific incidences of war crimes on civilians and civilian infrastructure through collaborations with groups such as Forensic Architecture. Maksym will share more about this work during the second part of his presentation today. So Maksym, on behalf of 221A and our community, I'd like to extend our utmost gratitude and thanks for completing this project with us, despite all of the challenges on the road. It means a great deal to me and everyone at 221A that we've been able to maintain our connections and momentum throughout all of the tumult of this year. Maksym's presentation will run for about 30 minutes, and we'll have time afterwards for questions from our live streamers today. So please ask your questions in the Q&A box in text, or if you raise your hand, we can bring you in as a panelist and you can join us with a live voice to speak with us during the Q&A period. So with that, Maksym, I'll hand it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesse, for your great introduction and for mentioning everyone who worked on this project and the complex path that we took to kind of show you today what we've got. My name is Maksym, as you heard, and I represent the team of the Center for Spatial Technologies. Almost everything that I'm going to show you today is done by the team, and it is quite strange to go back to this work because, as Jesse mentioned, we used to be Kyiv-based office, and due to Russian invasion, there were a lot of breaks for us in terms of operation as normal. It is great though to have a chance to show you the work and to kind of properly let it be out there, finished, even with new data from the new census, as a sort of also this gesture of not giving up to the the destruction and damage that is quite omnipresent for everyone who's Ukrainian, as a way to, saying that we continue to do things that we wanted to do. I'll start from telling you what Doma is. It's a wonderful project that has quite a long history by now, but it is something that started from a curiosity towards blockchains and smart contracts, and at the same time, as a group of architects, being involved in trying to solve issues relating to complexities of living in contemporary cities, particularly ones that have to do with housing affordability. And that complexity can be very well understood through Thomas Piketty's Capital book, where he's kind of showing how wealth over time grows faster than wages, which basically means that rich people are getting richer and poor people getting poorer. There is this paper that was published by MIT's graduate student, and his argument is that that dynamic is very much related to housing. It's always easy to talk about this to people in the context of Northern America. It's even easier to talk about this to Vancouverites, particularly. We never had such enthusiasm from people as we did in Vancouver, particularly because this problem is, of course, extremely important and it's very easy to see. In the core of the project, there was this idea that we can take existing residential units and basically collectively own them through this kind of shares that will be powered by smart contracts. And as simple as it sounds, it does provide a new repertoire of tools for activism for people who want to make sure that the city does not get completely privatized and kind of owned by corporate landlords. So again, the provocation was that we can split each unit between a group of friends or people who don't know each other through the process of tokenization, and then create certain types of incentives for housing to be more of home and less of an asset, right? This is an important kind of dualism here where, as soon as the economy is based on housing, as soon as buildings and particularly residential flats are the biggest asset class in the world, it's kind of increasingly puts pressure on especially younger people or unprivileged people to get access to this feeling also of being at home sometimes. So we also thought it would be interesting if we, in this model where there is a range of people who co-own flats, if we would also distribute some points of equity to people who live in the flats longer. So the idea was, again, the more rent you pay, the more you stay in an apartment, the more you kind of generate shares of ownership. In this way, it's quite simple mechanism, which is kind of like similar to rent to own schemes, except again, for us, this was more of apparatus to think about ways to make living in cities more equitable. This project took us a while, and particularly in the beginning of it, we were focusing on Eastern Europe. Eastern European cities are specific because housing there is very cheap. So property prices will cost you around 10 years of rent, right? So as much as you pay for rent, you multiply that by 10 years, you get 10, 12 years. That would be the apartment cost. And we wanted to solve that through this kind of shares generating in the city for Eastern European cities. And when we started working with 221A, we partnered with Francis Tseng, who's a New York-based programmer, with whom we developed this game, which was trying the first time to look at Northern America. And we, of course, discovered that there's a completely different set of issues in the US. We worked with US Berkeley, UC Berkeley PhD scholar and professor called Desiree Fields, who writes on kind of these automated landlords who basically use AI to buy cheapest properties in the city and make money on flipping properties. This was the game where you would play as commons and you would try to resist the pressure from these kind of corporate automated landlords who try to buy the whole city. And by doing that, they also, of course, increase prices for the people. So this was the game that we also developed very closely working with 221A, and it was in the very early time of our collaboration. You can see here some of the assumptions behind this game, where there are certain types of mechanics that players can take to defeat this force of an automated landlord. And while doing this, we also realized that a lot of these things are possible to understand through just looking at data and looking at property markets and how they basically push people out from certain cities. This is data from Vancouver that we put together in the beginning of this project just for ourselves to understand kind of the way property prices and rents are distributed throughout the city. Here you can see how I'm selecting different year and different types of things I'm looking at. And I can basically see how radically things shifted from 2006 to 2019. These changes are present all around the world. This kind of direction for housing becoming less and less affordable. But of course, Vancouver is one of the frontiers of that. And that's why we also had a lot of trouble with data. So German, who developed this tool, often had this question of like, I must have a mistake in my code. It can't be the case, of course, because we're also we haven't lived in Vancouver, therefore we don't have this visceral feeling of how terrible things are in terms of this kind of housing affordability. So sometimes it was hard to even intuitively grasp the extent to which these things are in Vancouver. But what you can play with, and I encourage you to open this. This is my Zoom link, but here's the dashboard. And it's very simple. This is something that we did as a way to basically help you go through the same process that we go through when we try to understand how housing situation is in a certain city. You, of course, have this income slider where you can see how much you make over the year. And then depending on the year, you can also see how things changed. And what these parameters are also crucial for us because they show you how your income corresponds to your rent. So there's this kind of boomer advice that you have to spend up to 30% of your income on your rent But that advice is very hard to follow if you're kind of a younger person who makes 30, 50K per year and lives in contemporary Vancouver, right? Or even if you go back in time, you can see how those things change, not that radically. So these colors here also come from weather forecasts, kind of like hinting at this kind of more visceral feeling of hot, cold, how overheated the market is in certain moments of time. So indeed, as Jesse said, we wanted to publish this in the late 2021. Unfortunately, Jesse got COVID. But then we had this another idea that we'll publish this dashboard in sometime in February. And it happened so that the date for the second launch was the 24th of February. And of course, this is the day where, things quite radically shifted for us. And we started doing things that are quite different from this. I want to briefly talk about that. And I want to briefly kind of let you get a sense of what CST is and what types of project we normally did. This is the link to the Vancouver dashboard that you can play with. And this is our headline on Instagram if you want to see some of the newer work. But I'll just say, like in the core of everything that we have been doing, there's this idea that you can model things to understand them better, right? So this is Manhattan and Highline case where we looked at fairly similar issue to what we had in Vancouver, in a way where here we wanted to know how publicly funded elevated park, which is called Highline. Some of you, especially those who have to do with architecture, landscape architecture, know it well. It's a beautiful park that is built on a former railway line, and it kind of caused an insane lift in property values. So it costed $187 million the construction of this park, but it caused 3.5 or $3.4 billion of private, basically private properties value uplift. So if you can see, by caused, I mean that the closer properties are to this park, the more they went up in price. And if you calculate the correlation, you will see that the effect of the Highline is $3.4 billion, which is interesting because it's a public investment that caused insane private gains. And this is a project we did together with a London-based studio called Dark Matter Labs. And you can read about this more in the Smart Commons project. The things that we would work with often had this spirit of kind of orientedness towards the future and desire to use the tools that we know how to use for some sort of societally beneficial cause. So what you see here is this kind of a flat that we purchased in the heart of Kyiv. And together with our team, we basically recorded every single element that was used in this process of renovation. And the reason we did it is, of course, because of thoughts about sustainability. And we had this little project funded by Climate, which is one of the biggest European funds that supports green initiatives in Europe. And, it was as a result of it, we had a bunch of exhibitions, but at the core of it, there is a very simple desire to understand not only costs, not only timelines of how much this renovation kind of took, but we also wanted to understand how much embodied carbon each of these materials have, and through that to understand their environmental impact. And what you see here again is kind of the method that we use all around in most of our projects, that the modeling is used to help us research, basically to help us understand something and help us see things that are not visible on surface, right? These types of projects were 99% of what we were working with. These kinds of things where there is a desire to look for something better in the future by understanding something. And this is the desk where I used to sit in Kyiv. This is the view from our office in Kyiv. And these are these two on the map. The Kyiv TV tower, which was later bombed by Russians on the 1st of March. This is our office. This is a territory that we spent 2 years studying. This was the only project that we did, which kind of looked more towards this darker, and also instead of looking towards the future, looked towards the past, looked toward darker topics of death, trauma, and genocide. So Babyn Yar is one of the most important locations in the history of the Holocaust, particularly because, especially in the West, many people don't know about this phase of the Holocaust as much as they do about gas chambers and Auschwitz and that kind of already much more industrialized phase. This is the place where people were shot by bullets. So each person had a killer, basically. And because this landscape changed so much, and the reason it changed so much is because Soviets didn't want to kind of pay a tribute to this landscape. They flattened it and turned it into something developable. It was very hard even for the Holocaust scholars to understand this place from the perspective from spatial perspective, you know. So what we had to do was to find archival maps and to build these 3D models, which show you to which extent this landscape got flattened, right? You can see here the most important images that kind of like, they're almost the only images where you can see the aftermath from the massacre. And what we did was we studied them and we figured out the exact locations where they were taken. And the way we did it was through identifying this hill. The hill that is visible from many angles. And first we noticed it, we figured out that there are these key markers that are possible to identify on this terrain. And then my colleague Kola wrote a script that positions the camera in a very precise way against these markers so that we know where the photographer who took these photographs stood in a way where you can then jump out of this landscape and see how the photograph is projected towards the landscape. So this was quite an important discovery, actually, because in the end, we managed to locate these important images, historically important images. And before we did this work, there was actually an argument between historians over where these places were, which is quite crazy. We worked a lot with witness testimonies. We analyzed them. We made this tool where you can click on any name of the street or any kind of type of object, like bags with clothing, for instance, and you would find every single testimony that mentions those things. And what we were doing right before the war was kind of like trying to reconstruct these specific locations with the help of all of these archival documents that we could find, including witness testimonies, photographs, some other documents, aerial images, and so on. So we were trying to create these images that basically do not exist. Here was also the first time when we met Forensic Architecture. It's a London-based group that we collaborate with right now, and they're pioneers in kind of using these multimedia tools to work with topics of war crimes and so on. So this is the landscape of Babyn Yar. This is flattened, and right next to this flattened landscape, they built the TV tower in 1970s. So you can see here how it's being constructed, how it's going up. It's the biggest, tallest Ukrainian steel structure. Oh, sorry, it was actually tallest in the world when it was constructed. Tallest only steel structure in the world. That's the correct way to say that. It's a beautiful architectural kind of edifice, and you can see it's standing over Cave's landscape, and here is it from our office. And of course, on the 1st of March, it was hit by a missile, which was quite striking. It's of course the symbolic meaning of it that is also important here. Not only the fact that it stands right next to one of the most important Holocaust sites and the kind of the country that presents itself as denazifiers hits this building with a missile. It's also, of course, the fact that it's the tallest building in Ukraine. It's something that everyone in the city knows. We simply wanted to understand what exactly happened on that day. So this is the project that we did in partnership with Forensic Architecture, where we tried to model the situation in as much detail as we can. We found all the footage that we could find. And on this footage, if you look closely, you can actually identify the missiles. And what you see here is the missile, the first missile did hit the building, and you saw the results of that. But there is a second missile that it seems like it missed the tower and hit one of these buildings that was actually meant to be used as a Holocaust museum. So 200 meters away, across the road, there is this Soviet-style gym, which basically got on fire as a result of this strike, and also 5 people were killed as a result of this particular missile landing. You can see their bodies here blurred. This was the very quick investigation that we did, also, like knowing this place very well. I want to very briefly tell you about the last project that I'll show now, and it's something that we have kind of like all our energy kind of I'm sorry kind of dedicated towards. It's the investigation of Mariupol theater explosion that was an airstrike. And this particular project is something where we were starting this investigation to understand what happened. And we started to uncover so many different layers, so many different aspects of this particular story that the more we found, the more we wanted to stop on it and really pay tribute to this this event. And it's increasingly becomes something kind of massive in terms of ways of looking at this particular building. And of course, I mean, the way stupid architects start something like this is they look at drawings. We found these in the archives, and these are the drawings of the theater, quite beautiful. Of course, as an architect, seeing these drawings, you can then build a 3D model of the theater in a lot of details. So you can understand where which spaces were, maybe sometimes even locate them on the 3D model. So this is all the footage that we collected. There are historic photographs of the theater in the 50s. You can see how that theater then kind of becomes a Ukrainian institution. And at a certain point of time, on the 24th of February this year, it suddenly stops being a theater and starts being a bomb shelter. So people from all around Mariupol come to this place to seek refuge, to kind of hide from the missiles that are first hitting only kind of peripheral areas of Mariupol, but after a certain while, you can also see explosions being in the bomb shelter of the theater almost a night and day non-stop. up until the 16th of March when the air bomb hit the building itself. So this is a very simple thing that we're kind of building now, but again, you can see that there are photographs that are located against some of the rooms. So we use this to work with witnesses where we can, if we need to pull out a certain piece of information, we'll be able to see, oh, like let's look at this particular room. These are the images kind of located against the building. And in the same manner, we use this technique to understand the events of Babin Yar. And of course, oftentimes there are these videos. This is a video that is literally from Russian TV that we then turn into pieces of evidence because it's possible to turn them into a 3D model, photogrammetry, where you can kind of see important elements of the way the building is destroyed. These scans are super useful for us. This is the scan of the building before the explosion. This is the result of 3D modeling by drawings, and this is the scan of the building affected after the fire. So the missile and the explosion didn't damage this part of the building, but it caught on fire and burned. This is the image of how the building got damaged, destroyed, right? So this, of course, is the space of the stage. And here you see the curtain would hang here, and you can see the auditorium on this side. Images like this are possible to locate and understand where exactly they were taken, which also is important because then we can understand the nature of destruction, and we can understand what exactly are these debris and where they come from and what they are. So this is before and after photogrammetries. One thing that is very new for us and that we're kind of now very much focusing on is working with witnesses. So we managed to identify around 60 people already who were at the theater. And out of them, we talked to 22. We record these interviews with them when we speak to them for over an hour normally. And they tell us details about what they saw, what they experienced, went through. And with some of these witnesses, we then run something we call situated testimonies, which is the technique we learned from forensic architecture, where we invite these witnesses to our office here in Berlin, and with them, we basically go through the spaces where they were, and we try to reconstruct in as much detail exactly what they experienced and what they saw. So how those rooms were, what kind of stuff was there, why is it important, why they remember it. And, in this case, you can see Sergei Zabugonsky, who was one of the first people who came to the theater, explaining how him and his wife were positioned in a room where the explosion wave reached them and kind of smashed the metal door against them. So these are the kind of preliminary results of these situated testimonies. And as a result of this project, we hope to kind of overlay as much information that we can learn about this particular attack against the architectural model. So architectural model in this case works as a backdrop for us to add things that we know about this particular incident, including this incredible story of people self-organizing. If you can imagine, 1,500 people at some point lived in this building, in a city that is besieged, in a city that doesn't have electricity, that doesn't have access to internet, of course. It's quite amazing how, we started talking to them, keeping in mind that these are potentially traumatized people who are victims of horrible war crime, but they don't actually think or speak that way. They are actually quite proud about what they were able to achieve in this particular context in terms of, separating tasks, helping each other, making sure the food is there, baking bread, you know, and doing these incredible things. At the same time, you know, the telling this story and kind of like recording this story against the backdrop of this building is important for us, because then we can understand what was destroyed on the 16th of March and exactly how the destruction is distributed in a spatial way, right? So where were most of casualties, which rooms were supposedly more occupied than other ones, and so on. So this is something that we currently are busy with. Here again, you can see the website that Jesse mentioned. It's the place where we share these investigations. It's called investigations.support. And if you want to follow the practice, our handle is below. This is it from my side. I think it's good if we can shift this towards more of questions and answer type of format. I'm aware that the arc I made between the work we did in collaboration with 221A towards this more recent work is quite dramatic. But still, hopefully you would come across some of the logics that are present in our work that are kind of like continuing through time and irrespectively of the what's going on in the world. Yeah, this is it from my side. Thank you.
Thanks, Maksym. I'm hoping everyone can hear me now, and I'm brought back in as a box and in the presentation. Yeah, the breadth is quite astounding, and the courage to persist throughout it is quite astounding as well. And I think it's just the demands of this year that have placed upon the team to kind of make that dramatic arc in the shift. And I think it proves, you know, to a lot of us outside that, you know, citizen and kind of civic led, not civic as in a governmental response, because you're very much independent of that, but these are quite crucial in solving large scale problems and trying to document large scale problems. So I think that's what ties your work together, and why we've wanted to work with you over the past couple of years to kind of engage in that. Whether the problems are immediate, like the war at hand, or whether they're maybe a couple of years out with climate change, or whether they're something that occurred gradually and persistently over a generation, like the way that property has become so unaffordable in Vancouver and has changed the lives for countless many people and families and communities here. So thank you for the work. I'll open it up to anyone attending the live stream. If you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A. And you can write them in the Q&A box, or if you want to raise your hand, our webinar pilots, Tao and Jastej can bring you in as a live voice. I mean, Maksym, how has it been trying to reassemble the team, or kind of continue the through line of work? Because you're based in Berlin, but of course, after a situation like an invasion, people don't always get to choose kind of where they end up afterwards. And how has the team been operating?
Yeah, I mean, the team is currently scattered. The colleagues of mine who were part of the 221A project, as you know, Alessa and German, who made the dashboard possible, for different reasons, not always war related. They've kind of, we still collaborate a bit, but they're not currently part of the team who does the investigative work. And two of our team members now are based in Kyiv. So, you know, the distributedness of the team is part of the game, it seems. The first thing we started to do when the war started was to map these events. And to be honest, it was kind of unthinkable for the first few months of the war to do anything else. We completely dropped all the other collaborations and projects and very intensely focused on first making sure that our loved ones are safe and somewhere safe, and second, trying to work on this kind of investigative work. I think now, as things are, I can't say normalizing, but you get to understand that this is the reality that is facing you, and that's what's going on. So as that's going on, we basically started to slowly open up the older types of work that we did, and it's actually quite useful for sometimes for things that we build, even sometimes technically, in terms of development and code and stuff like that. So at this point, we're still mostly focusing on the investigations project, and that's where my mind is currently. But yeah, this is roughly how this whole thing happened.
Mm. We have a question coming in from Leanne Carley. She says, awesome work, so inspiring. Have you seen change occurred based on the work with 221A? Have you seen it shift perspective and actions on stakeholders who work in housing in Vancouver? Maybe I can just say that, well, we've just launched it today, the dashboard. So this is the first public instance. And in developing it, we also kind of met with a couple of housing folks who work in housing, who study the issues. And I think they were quite encouraged by the work at hand. But maybe Maksym, you can reflect on that question, or what kind of effect might something like the dashboard have?
Yeah, it's a very good question. Yeah, I have to say this is like, that we tried and we did some things that were extremely complicated in terms of, for instance, at some point we were trying to figure out how to buy a flat and sell it to 100 people, as these shares, and how that would legally be possible and so on. But in the end, the dashboard, like, if I can look at it now from a bit of a distance, it looks almost stupidly simple, right? It's like such basic stuff that you can see there. You can see, like if you have average income in Vancouver, like 40% or whatever percent of your income go towards housing. These things are very basic, but somehow I feel like those types of, like it's very, very simple kind of steps towards people being aware of what housing market is in their city, and also what is normal worldwide, and what is also like actually comfortable. What is it that we want to fight for? What is it that is desirable? I think that is quite an important thing to figure out. The idea that we had when we did this in terms of future was to then think about ways to then do this comparatively for other cities. So, someone who's from Vancouver may find this dashboard too obvious, for example, but then imagine seeing how something like this works, let's say in Berlin or in in Jakarta, in some of the completely different types of markets. And of course, for something like this, it's also important to engage with this on the level of policy making. So with Jesse and the team that 221A put together, we had a range of consultations and calls with actually quite a lot of influential people who study either housing market in Canada or policy. And that was very helpful because we could kind of like also get their perspective on these issues. Yeah, I mean, I generally think the simple response to your question is, by understanding what is desirable in the most simple and basic terms, we can better, unite together to fight the common foes, whether they're automated landlords or policymakers who don't work hard enough to make sure things are, livable.
Thank you. Just some more comments coming in from Sharon Kaplan, who says incredible work. Julia Aoki, one of our board members, she says, not a question, just a message of appreciation. This presentation stunned me a bit as it documents the urgent transition in your work. And then a question coming from B. Bogart. Do you have any thoughts, reflections on the potential tensions between notions of objectivity in relation to creative practice and the construction of your images and models, etc.?
Was it notion of objectivity?
Yeah, in relation to creative practice.
Yeah, I love that question. That's exactly where my brain is, in a way that I think the stuff that we did before and that we, the things that we focused on were kind of more dealing with these issues of like city scale data. Let's try to see this objectively. Let's try to figure out what can be the good solution. Let's try to figure out, in the process of renovating flats in a certain city, what is the biggest pollutant? Maybe it's something that is easily substitutable with something else. These kind of questions of kind of person who hopes for better future and wants to help to contribute to solving some of these issues. And we tried to apply something like this for the investigations stuff, because in the beginning we saw the scale of destruction and how many people suffer from it and how many different locations are targeted and what is the pattern behind this and so on. So we started to collect data and we started to basically log every day all the incidents that happened. And then we started to collaborate with a bunch of people, and we realized that there's quite a lot of organizations that are doing similar thing. And this was a very wise kind of advice on side of forensic architecture's founder A.L. Weissman, when he was like basically suggesting maybe we should not chase that scale of, like fully representing something, and instead looking at things that are more kind of dense and complex, and at the same time that through looking at which for a long time you can maybe see the reflection of the world where they also persisted in a historic way. So in that way we started looking at Mariupol theater, and in that way we kind of dropped a bit of this image of a scale, but still wanted to see it in an objective way as possible. But there was a second shift, which happened to be the witnesses. When we speak to them, they completely kind of shifted the way we perceived this attack and the way, even what we wanted to figure out. Like in the beginning, we wanted to understand the explosion, what exactly was hit, where did the missile explode, what kind of weight it had, what kind of, what exactly that missile was. And we still want to figure that out. But increasingly, we are kind of diving deeper into these very subjective, very sentimental stories from the people we work with. And I also find incredible satisfaction in that. I feel like this is why this work is also in a way therapeutic for us. And also this process that I showed you, where witnesses sit with us in the room and model some of these events, is also kind of in a weird way therapeutic for them, it seems, in a way that they they don't want to leave. They kind of like have this extendedness of time to look at these things and recall what happened and to somehow process, even what happened. So yeah, I mean, it's just my current, like what I'm currently focusing on is trying to think about topics like memory, or topics like, like kind of nationwide trauma and how societies deal with that. And of course, for something like that, you want to read and learn about things that are more kind of sensitive, and as opposite to ones that are more kind of trying to read something at scale with correct data sets. And I do see value in both approaches, to be honest. It's just that it was nice to hear your question, because it almost encompasses the shift from one to another.
Another question coming in from Leanne Carley. So could you see potential for the situated testimonies in the housing work for Vancouver?
Yeah, I'm very intrigued by what will happen to us after we're done with this. I don't know. This is something which it so fastly changes the way we see things here with this particular project that I'm scared to now freestyle on this, because I'm sure there will be some way that this affects us, but it's a great question. Of course, yeah, I have to think about it.
And for us to think about too, and at 221A, as we think about this, because we're also involved with housing now through the 221A Artist-Run Housing Society, with our first residential properties on Main Street here. Maksym, maybe you could just say where is this work going that you've been doing in the past year, and what has it been supporting? Because now all of a sudden your work has entered the realm of kind of human rights and war documentation, and who's using it, or who's using it as documentation?
Yeah, this is a great question, and it also is. It's always confusing when you are trying to be multidisciplinary. It's always confusing. Where is your kind of client, or what is this directed towards? I think we already tried to work in certain frameworks. So through forensic architecture, we know that we'll basically submit these materials that we work on towards legal procedures, right? And this is amazing. This is super interesting, because we also, through this, will learn a lot. We get a lot of advice on what types of things we have to pay attention towards, or maybe even if we talk to witnesses, how exactly we should do it and what we should not do and stuff like that. We also worked with mass media. So we have a collaboration with the big Ukrainian media. We're discussing a partnership with Der Spiegel here in Germany, and the TV tower case was published in the New York Times, with these kind of scroll telling type of thing where you spin the model and you read things. And that was quite nice. But I think neither the judicial kind of context nor the media one is not our primary kind of focus. At least that's where I stand now. And this is literally, for me, is the way I think about this now, is that we're trying to think about memory and memorializing the site that is so important for Ukraine and for Ukrainians, at the same time that is out of reach and we don't know when it will be back. Before it's back, we cannot touch the drawing, and we cannot, we cannot use it for anything that would help us figure out what exactly happened, and we cannot. I'm just thinking on what's going on there now, when it's of course being manipulated and affected by the Russian side in very specific ways. Maybe a month ago they played a Tchaikovsky concert there as a kind of a way to show what Russian culture is and how it makes the city great. Things like that are quite striking and painful. And I think kind of as a response to seeing that, having this space digitally in a way that people who care about this can gather and almost literally go there as if we're going to a memorial, is something that in my mind is something that this is going towards. I mean, but also this is very new and we are figuring things out on the way. And of course, these contexts such as, you know, the mass media or the legal institutions, we of course will work with them. If that makes sense, Jess.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's up to the world to figure out what to do with the work too, which is having the information out there is very valuable, and so many people from survivors, from witnesses to larger bodies, to media, will be able to draw from it. And I think that multidisciplinary just makes its impact like so much more broad and so much more impactful. I'll leave it for one more or two more questions if there's anything else coming from our live streamers. I haven't seen any hands raised. Okay. Well, Maksym, this has been incredible to work with you over the past couple of years, and it's always good to see you and hear from you. And I follow along with a lot of interest and support always. So thank you so much. Thank you, German. I think you were on the call as well, so waving to you. Thank you so much for all of your data crunching and your responsiveness.
It was amazing.
We haven't seen you in a while, but thank you so much for the work over the years on this as well. Virginia Hong says, thank you so much for sharing this incredible work. One more anonymous attendee just asks, incredible work. What other data do you wish you had access to?
Yeah, I mean, there is always issue of quality of data. There's always issue of kind of making assumptions towards making something that is, you know, I assume the question is about Vancouver dashboard, but since there's no specifications about that, I'll say I really wish to see the video how the missile strikes the theater or something like that. What I was about to say is that there's always this work that is necessary to make this image clear and possible for people to engage with, such as with the weather type of gradient that shows you how it feels to live in Vancouver. There's a lot of things that would be nice to see. It would be interesting to have more data on people's incomes and their distribution in a way that is also kind of spatial. It would be great to have more census data, more spatial. That's what I heard from German. But what I was about to say is that in the end, it's still not the main question. It's you can figure out the way to do things with data that is out there, and then as soon as it's is you know what to fight for. That's my main thought about that.
I agree. I think it's designers like you that help us make sense of it. For those who columns of numbers and things don't always make the most sense. So thank you. All right, we will leave it there. I wish you a good evening in Berlin. Thank you to everyone who joined us today, and take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you all. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.